I wake up this morning and thankfully I'm not late for the Elders Live. I'm never going to live that down. Do you have Duey Freeman, Mark Sylvester here? We're the Elder Council. Duey, tell me a story of one time when you were late. And it was like it was high stakes and whatever that means to you. Tell us a story about being late.
Well, I was teaching a class for University of Northern Colorado, and two things happened. One, I was about 7 or 8 minutes late. It was the very first day, and I scurried into class, and it's like, I'm sorry. And within about 3 to 5 minutes of getting there, I had picked up a piece of chalk or an eraser or something. This was actually back in the days when there were really chalk and blackboards and erasers. And it slipped out of my hand, dropped onto the floor, and I squatted down to
Oh, here it comes.
pick it up. And the entire seam of my pants, from the bottom of my zipper all the way up to the back of my belt, ripped wide open. Thankfully, that day I actually had underwear on. It was many times I would go commando. And so those two things all happened within about the first 12 minutes of my class. Thankfully, one of the women in the class and this was a class for teachers, had a sewing kit with her.
Oh.
And I went into the other room and sewed my pants up. I came back to class.
I love that.
So,
well, other than being psychically scarred for life, a few months ago, I got a call at like, I don't know, 7:02 from Traver. Dude, you're on live or something like that. It's like, oh shit. So and that happened to me 40 years ago, where I'd been in training at the Hills Brothers Coffee Company as the head chef. And you had to be at the kitchen at 4 because the first crew ate at 4:30. It was the employee kitchen on top of the Hills Brothers building in San Francisco at the base of the Oakland Bay Bridge. What a great job. I was 19 years old and I was living in what we would call now an Airbnb. It was like a flop house. And I just hear the bam, 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 bam. And I was like, and it's the guy who runs the house. He goes, Sylvester, your boss is calling. You're supposed to. And I look, it's 7:00. I'm supposed to be there 3 hours early. And I'm just this punk hippie cook kid. And I show up and I walk in through a whole, because I had the keys to open up then all the employees, and I had to walk through all of those people and go in and it was gnarly. I went and bought what was called a Big Ben clock. It was this big with big bells on it. And then someone told me, put it underneath a pot and then it'll make so much noise. There's no way you could sleep through it. So you do what you got to do. This morning, I set 2 alarms to make sure I could be here. I'm so glad to be here. Duey, I've been thinking this week.
Good morning to you. Good morning to everybody.
Glad everybody's here. I'm just thinking back to Austin and glad we're not there this weekend. There's golf ball sized hail there. But I remember sitting there and having this conversation, actually looking at an audience of men, and it made a huge difference in the conversation. How about you?
I'm a little lost on what you're
having guys here in the room with us while we're talking.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
Oh, I got it. Going back to our live event at Houston.
Bit of a callback. Yeah.
Yeah, that was unbelievably wonderful.
Yeah.
I enjoyed that. This clearly reminds me of that.
Yeah.
So.
And then when we finished and I clamshelled the computer and got up and Jake and I did an improv set that nobody was expecting. And that was one of the highlights for me, I got to say, because those weekends are so intense, and it gave us a chance to kind of let off some steam and laugh a little.
Laugh a little bit, yeah.
Yeah. So that got me thinking. I've been thinking all week. There's something in improv we do, which is you've heard of yes and.
Mhm.
What we're teaching against is no but. So you say something like, "No, I'm not wearing a red velvet suit." Like, you know, no, no. And last night we did a student show and a teacher show here in town, and we have one guy who I cannot get to not say no. He just says no. And I finally videoed him. And so I'm going to take him offline on Tuesday and say, here, this is what I've been talking about. I want you to see yourself doing this. So I thought what we talk about is understanding denial. And when I say that, and we'll go for 6 or 7 minutes and we'll take some questions. When I say understanding denial, what does that mean to you?
I that has different meanings to me depending on what the circumstances are. Um, Sometimes it means stonewalling. Sometimes it
Hmm.
means um, lack of internal nurturing. Sometimes it means um, self-protection. Sometimes it means um, actually a level of ignorance. And what I mean by ignorance is not knowing. I'm not talking about being stupid. I'm talking about ignorance and like I don't know X, Y, and Z, but I'm going to actually deny my own ignorance and pretend like I know something.
Hmm.
Um, the other place where I think it really comes in is in the process of grief,
Hmm.
is that there's oftentimes a stage in a grieving process where we actually deny that whatever we're grieving, whatever loss we've had, we um, it's like, yeah, that didn't bother me. Yeah, it's not that big a deal. You know, the other way that I see it coming in is in bypassing, and we can bypass in a lot of different ways. Oftentimes, people will, and most of you have probably heard about this. It's called spiritual bypassing, where it's like instead of really allowing ourselves to feel something, we'll go, "Oh, everything will be okay. God will take care of this," and that kind of stuff. But we can bypass in a lot of different ways. That's just one of the ways that we can bypass. But that in my world is a way to be in denial of certain things. So
So I understand all of those. What about the straight up, let's just talk about interpersonal relationships and just the hard no. No. No, I'm denying the truth of what someone has just said.
well, most of the time when I see that, it either is a bypass or it's a way to stonewall or it it looks like it's a what would the word be? It actually looks like a denial, but most of the time when I see that, it's a level of self-protection that people.
Give me an example of that. I'm because what I'm trying to figure out a way to recognize that when I see it and then be able to call it out and do something about it in real time, which rather than waiting for a therapy session, but to be able to, see that and know that and either change my own behavior. Again, it's around awareness
Mhm.
that that's happening. Give us some clues of
Well,
what that looks
let's
like.
say that I mean, sort of a made up scenario of of, um, I mean, we started off with, talking about being perhaps late to something. And one way is like I could come in if I'm late to something, I could say, well, I'm not really late,
Mm.
even though the facts are there. Or if someone would say to me, you really hurt my feelings, and I would go, no, I didn't. Those are, on the outside, they look like denial. On the inside, they're really a self-protective process, mostly from my own shame. If I do that,
Oh,
it's like,
oh, okay. There you go.
oh yeah, I'm feeling shame because I fucked up. I didn't wake up. I didn't get to this class on time. I mean, those kinds of things. Or, if it's somebody I care about and I did something that hurts their feelings, and I'm going, no, I didn't. It's really a cover up for my own shame.
Hmm.
Um, and sometimes taking that further, I think, is a process of wanting to, of feeling out of control and wanting to come in and have some level of trying to regain control.
Hmm.
So,
Do you think that someone who's exhibiting that kind of behavior could be self-aware enough to is there conscious incompetence at play here? In so much so that they like, I'm aware that I just fucked this up because they've heard this show or they see themselves do
oh
it
yeah,
and they,
most of the time when people do those things,
yeah.
if if they really stop, yeah, they're pretty aware that they fucked up.
So what would you would what, a behavior to remediate that so that they could learn from that, go, oh man, okay, yeah. The yes and their fuck up.
Yes, and I fucked up.
Well, it's
Absolutely.
admitting and going, yeah, no, wow, caught myself. Hey, you're right.
Yeah,
I mean, it's at a level of awareness, self-awareness.
the big thing that I think that people need to get is when we do fuck up, which we all do, and we do something, we offer a denial kind of a process or a no kind of a
Mhm.
process. We do that out of a desire to protect ourselves. And our underlying hope is that it'll go away
Mm.
often. And relationally, though, a big piece that happens is that kind of a process damages relationship. And maybe not always in the like in the great big picture, but certainly in the smaller picture. And what they're hoping will go away is their shame and maybe guilt, or maybe they're worried about the other person judging them. What In the denial, though, what it does is it creates a schism
Mm.
that
Mm.
sometimes will take hours to resolve
Mm.
and maybe days, versus coming in and going, yeah, I fucked up. I was late. I didn't plan. I slept through my alarm. Um, you know, I said something that I thought was going to be funny and it wasn't. And I mean, all of that kind of stuff. And I apologize. And that usually takes 3 to 5 minutes. And so there's a piece in here where it's like a lot of times what we will do is there's this sort of um, I'm trying to think of the right terminology for this. We want we don't want to take our time to resolve something.
So here's the conundrum.
Well, hang on, let me finish
Okay,
this.
okay.
So we're in denial because we don't want to take time to
Right,
resolve something. So there's sort of this time value
right,
equation that we
right,
often have.
right.
And and if we're able to come in and go, yeah, I just fucked up,
Whatever it was.
whatever it was, that's actually the way to deal with the time value equation, and in a much different way than if we were doing a gig of denying, and then a time value equation gets blown out of the water. Then we're spending literally sometimes hours.
I think it's so interesting that you say that because I don't know if you ever heard this on the mat in martial arts, but our grandmaster would always say, "Go slow to go fast."
Yep.
And so, and I love in talking with you when you attach time to things, like when we talked about the grieving process of a death of a loved one is about 18 months, and you kind of go through that whole thing. So what you've just told us is that the amount of time it's going to take to recover from the act of denial can be several hours to a few days, that you're going to have to live with that feeling, as opposed to 5 minutes. So that time value equation. So just doing the math for myself, while it may be very hard to man up and be vulnerable and let my shield down and go, as you said, I'm protecting myself, so I'm gonna let my shield down. Actually, 5 or 6 minutes later, I'm fine and moving on with life, rather than 2.5 days I'm still moping or still hurting from something. Did I get that right?
Yeah, totally. Or whomever we're in relationship with is still angry with us 2 days later.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt. So what I'd like to do, I'd like to move to have some time. I think if we've got, it's 20 after, we could probably take 4 or 5 calls. So what I'd love you to do is just raise your hand in the system, because I will just look over here on the our attendees, and if you got your hand raised, there we go. My video's down. Thank you. There we go. I'm back. So someone want to start us off? They've got a question for us. I'm looking. Anybody, come on, someone's got it. Life is wonderful for everybody. Bill, come on, you're smiling. What's going on, bud? There we go. Okay. Can't hear you though, sir.
Now
Still
you're on
can't
mute,
hear.
Bill.
Doesn't say he's on mute.
Oh, something's not halfway happening.
Something's not right. Let Bill get his audio fixed up. Oh, did I hear something just click in?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can. There you go. Thanks,
All
sir.
right.
We should make a commercial. Hear me now?
I don't know
I'm getting t-shirts made that just say you're on mute. Okay, Bill, all you, sir. What do you got?
I don't have a specific question that I have in mind. Although, yeah, if I had planned a little bit better, I certainly would have. You know, I appreciate the conversation that you all have been having, and particularly the last podcast reflecting back on the time in Austin.
Hmm.
And coming out of that experience, one thing that I struggled with a little bit was I have like some pretty significant worthiness challenges, and I had a really difficult time receiving the gifts that were given to me in Austin. And coming out of that experience, experienced a little bit of went into a little bit of a flat spin, because in situations where I'm not feeling worthy of something, I do a really great job of self-sabotaging. So and all of this occurred kind of in the context of going through a reduction in force with work. So I'm, currently looking for employment as well, and so all of that's been kind of bubbling up in my mind, and more than anything, I'm grateful to you gentlemen and to the guys on the call that have definitely given me the inner strength to be able to persevere and move forward in a positive way. um, so those are just things that are kind of percolating on my mind, and particularly Dewey, as you were bringing up, like the whole concept of how we deal with shame and denial, and overcome that. That's kind of top of mind for me. So again, not a question, but you all asked for someone to speak up, so I thought I would at least enter the fray.
Thank you, sir. Are you okay if I respond to that a little bit?
Of course, of course.
So let me reframe a little bit about what you said. And when you were saying that you had a hard time taking in the support that you got, did I hear that right?
Receiving
Correct.
gifts. Yeah.
And receiving gifts.
Yeah.
And by the way, as a quick aside, I actually loved my interaction with you in Austin. It was wonderful. And you really showed up in a way that was different than the previous time that I had spent time with you. Putting in and taking all of that and putting what you said into terms of denial is that part of what you're doing is denying yourself the nurturing that
Yeah.
that was given to you. And does that make sense?
Absolutely.
And if we put that in some of the terms that we were just talking about, is and it this is a bit of a paradoxical process, but it's like when we deny ourselves the nurturing that we're given, a part of that has to do with the fear, an underlying fear of being nurtured. Because if we allow ourselves to be nurtured, we actually also, a part of that is allowing ourselves to be vulnerable.
Okay, there you go.
And the underlying fear is, oh my God, something like I'm talking in some generalities here, but it's something like, oh my God, if I get nurtured, what will happen? What will that touch? Will I have feelings that I don't want to feel? Will I have, will I owe somebody something? Will I think that I'm a fake and I don't deserve it? Well, I mean, all of those kind of things. And there's 1,000 ways that we can allow ourselves to be nurtured. I mean, for instance, earlier, God, my timing's way off. Earlier was it this week or last week? Jeez. I got a load of hay in, and a couple of men, even on this call, were very instrumental in helping me take hay from down below where I come in and up top. I mean, it was amazing. And, I had a chance on Wednesday and I always am grateful, but to even more personally thank two of the men that were instrumental in helping me. And it's like that feels really nurturing to me to have people help me with it. I mean, it takes I did it alone, it would take me 8 hours. With numbers of people coming up, we knock it out in an hour and a half, and it nurtures me and then nurtures my horses. So it's like take a look at what happens for you around the concept of taking in nurturing. Because when we do that, we also have to have a level of vulnerability.
Right.
To let that in.
Yeah. You continue to bat 1,000, Dewey.
So
Dewey, I was just thinking, is someone giving you a compliment a form of nurturing?
1,000%.
I was very fortunate to learn when I was 18. I was in a management training program at a very young age. I now looking back feel very, very lucky. But they taught us how to take a compliment. And I didn't know why that was important at the time. Like how to honestly take one, which is we paired up and I would give you a compliment and you would look me in the eyes and all you were allowed to say was thank you. Couldn't say anything else. All you could say was thank you. And then you would come back to me and I would say thank you. Because we always I add to that, just say thank you, look them in the eyes and just really accept it as honestly given. And in thinking about this conversation right now, how many of us have a really hard time of just taking a sincere thank you from someone, and that little piece of here's your time value thing, that the second it takes you to be present, look them in the eye and say thank you for a compliment actually has a very long residual effect because you feel good because you really took that. But would you agree with that?
Mm-hmm. Totally.
Why do we have such a hard time taking compliments?
Well, actually, are you open to expanding that a little bit?
Yeah.
I think maybe a bigger question might be how many, and let me ask this directly, we have 12, 13 people on here. How many people in this room right now can truly allow themselves to be nurtured?
Mm.
Wow, no hands. How many of you allow yourselves to be nurtured with food? Like when you eat, do you like hurry up and eat so that you can go do something else? Or do you actually allow yourself to slow down? I think that was you, Traver.
It was.
You allow yourself to slow down and actually savor the food and taste it. And when you eat, feel the blood sugar level changes in your body where you're going, ah. I mean, how many of you do that? How many of you in relationship like with any of the men that are in here, like allow yourself to be, when somebody says, hey, yeah, man, I'm here for you. I got your back. I'll help you out. How many of you allow yourself to really, really take that in? Yeah, it's a big deal. If you're in a relationship with a woman, how many of you allow yourself to somebody, and I've been in rooms with numbers of you where, women will walk by and just touch you on the head as they walk by. That's a way to be nurtured. How many of you allow that?
I was thinking exactly of that when Kimberly and I pass, during a busy day, and you either nurture or you're nurtured just with a simple touch. And
Right.
I have to say it's only been in the last it's been several years now, but I remember when I was kind of craving nurturing, And so I really want to be nurtured. And I was not paying attention to the little brush pass that you would get, just the little, hey, even it was just a millisecond of something, how big that is to lean into those and really just, I think it gets back to being present, Dewey, being present enough to receive that.
Yes. And actually seeing it for what it is. And I saw a comment, and was that you, Chris? I think you put in there that we're starving for it.
Yeah.
Want to speak to that a little bit, brother?
It's just hit me because I agree that we don't take time, and I was even thinking about the thank yous and I always instead of when I hear a thank you or I go try to help. Even a couple weeks ago, my brother and sister-in-law bought a house and just decided to go over and work in their yard to help them get a head start on everything. And I was like trying to escape the thank you. I just wanted to, kind of get out of there. And I always, instead of saying like, you're welcome or, whatever, I sprint out of there saying, no worries. I just get out of there.
Got it.
And I mean, so I don't know. I just feel like I need to be, it's hard, but I need to be more present. And I was thinking about times and, when I was in a much different place that because I'm not present and you get like um, an interaction that occurs where, like kind of that to that brushing feeling or, a female would give you some, completely innocent attention, I'll call it, and you're like the hairs go up and it's like you're in this like, well, wow, what was that, and it just is so invigorating and it can be it could be really nothing, but because we're at different times you're starved for it or needing it, you just and you don't realize it, or maybe it is, but I don't know. It just has me thinking, and it still happens now for me, but it's not nearly the same. In an this sounds wrong to say, but in the same unhealthy ways that it used to, but it's still unhealthy, if you will. So I just my thoughts, I guess.
Well, what do you mean by unhealthy?
Well, I mean, from the place that I'm like I was in a very hurt when it happened. I was in a very hurt place a number of years ago, trying to figure things out and feeling very empty. And I have a much fuller life now. But I'm seeing from this conversation that I still need to pump the brakes a little bit and be present in the moment and accept the thank yous and lean into maybe like things my wife might what my wife might do that would be I need to be more attuned to or present in that are um, that are along this way of receiving and being present in, I guess is what I'm trying to say. That
Got
makes
it.
sense.
Yeah.
Totally makes total sense. So let me just make a comment, and then Robert, you had your hand up a minute ago. So, see if you can make a point this week, or maybe this weekend, today, Saturday morning, of just being aware of the nurturing that you get, or whether it's from your wife or whether it's from your brother and sister-in-law, or whether it's from, I don't know if you have kids or not, but and even the little small pieces. Like one of the favorite things that happens for me is I have a favorite rocking chair that I sit in and work or have a coffee or whatever. And when Kimberly walks by, she just like brushes the top of my head. And it's, it if that happens a couple of times a day, it's just marvelous inside, and it's not, the same thing if someone says, hey, thank you, brother, or, I mean, those kinds of things, because part of what, and then be aware of what would happen if you actually accept it, how vulnerable you have to be. Like when your brother and sister-in-law, thanked you for helping in their yard. I mean, you're making their life better. So you're nurturing them. How do you, are you going to allow yourself to be nurtured in response?
I want to keep a little nurturing scorecard in my pocket all weekend, Dewey. There's something about having that. I'm almost not kidding, because it actually, you set an intention, like my radar now is any radar operators on the call. Maybe the chances are this group there is one. I'm just going to set the filter for nurture. And as nurturing things come in, because when you're open to it, you never know when it's going to come in. It's a smile from someone that you did a little favor to, and letting them go first at the intersection, or you gave them a pass. You're just being polite to someone, just taking that nurturing. Robert, where's Robert?
He's down on my screen. He's down here in this corner.
Okay.
And you had your hand up a little bit ago and it came down. I don't know.
Yeah, I just
didn't want to keep holding it up. Hey, Robert, how are you? Good morning, sir.
Morning. The reciprocal nature of it too, is it's not just how we're nurturing ourselves when we accept a compliment from somebody. It's also giving that gift back to them. At least the way that I've thought about it in the past. Like, someone put it to me, when you deny someone's gift of a compliment, you're basically like, it's like, I imagine a child coming up with a present and you just kind of smacking it out of their hand and being like, and just walking away, like, oh, it's kind of a harsh way to think about it, but in many respects it shifted how, because I struggled with this for a long time, is being in that vulnerable moment and keeping eye contact and really grounding in and taking a deep breath. And something that I practice personally is just, I'm receiving this and thank you. So that person, you keep that contact with that person, and then I look at it as that gift back to them also. They're showing appreciation, but then also giving that and reciprocating it back to them. So both people are nurtured.
Totally.
Dewey, and
I saw it just real quick a few minutes ago. Little Kara came up and snuggled on you. Two things. One is, I hope that made your day. Me seeing that made my day.
There you go. What's interesting, and people who've listened to the show know that I tend to make parallels between life and improv all the time. And I inadvertently did not realize that there's a skill building exercise we do called gift giving, which this conversation is making me think of, and it is direct parallel. And I'm going to give you a gift. Oh, here's a little crystal ball for you, sir. And I give it to you, and you take it and say, oh, I love this crystal ball. And oh, it has a little velvet bag on it. And I give it to Robert, and then Robert takes it and we look at each other, and I thank you for giving me that. And then I look at it, and then I add something. So it's acceptance and addition. So I add something to it and I could give it back to you, or we give it to someone else. And we do this to teach how to have that acceptance and addition. And as the white belts are learning improv, they go, oh, it's not a crystal ball. This is a baseball. Would be a common thing. No, it's not. Yes, you gave me a crystal. No, it looks just like a baseball. No, I'm denying that reality of something that someone just made up. And it's just interesting, the parallels that the skill building we do in a fun setting translates over really nicely into life and just
Lifestyle.
learn how to accept. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We have time to take a couple of more questions from the audience. We have some hands up or go into the chat
Yeah, and
yeah, Dill Traver's got one up there.
and then also, just so everyone knows, if there's something else you came in with other than what we're talking about, feel free to bring that in.
Yeah, of course. Yes.
Go for it, T.
Thanks, gents. I love the conversation of taking compliments and saying thank you. I think that's a really valuable skill for men specifically to have, and it really does help ground us. I'd love to circle back to Bill's conversation and ask you both. We all know that big transitions, work-wise, life-wise, are like a major part of a man's journey. Yet it feels like almost archetypal in that transitional experience for many men is a shot to the self-esteem or an interpretation that even if the next thing is going to be amazing, the middle space is interpreted as some kind of less than or failure. So I'm wondering if you guys would speak perhaps to your own transitions and how you've navigated not letting that feeling of okay, I just got divorced. That clearly means I'm a piece of shit, even though the next marriage is going to be the one that's where I thrive and etc. Or I just lost my job. I must be a piece of shit, even though the next job is the thing that I was really meant to do. How did you guys navigate that? And how would you recommend other men navigate that?
I'm gonna take a first bite at the apple there, Duke.
Yes. First of all, Bill, and thanks for circling us back around, T. Do you remember what you said, Bill, when I think you used the word downsizing? Was that the word?
Riff. Reduction in force.
Yeah, reduction in force.
Mhm.
And remind me again what you do professionally.
I work for a medical device company in compliance.
Got it.
Yeah,
Which is
I'm a wage slave, a former wage slave.
a former what?
I'm a former wage slave.
Wage slave. What's the difference between saying reduction in force and saying either I got laid off or I got let go or I was fired or any of those terms? What's the difference?
Absolutely none. It's a euphemism.
Yeah, big time.
Right. It's also a way to deny.
Mm.
It's like, oh, we're like whitewashing it. We're softening it. And we're saying, yeah, reduction in force and blah, blah, blah. And I think this is part of what T's talking to, maybe. It's like, yeah, I got my ass fired and I'm pissed off about it. The biggest, and many times when we go, yeah, we were fired, that term comes with, oh, we were incompetent, which is clearly not the case. But we can even be more honest by saying, you know, whoever's running the company, they're not making it financially, so there's not money there to pay me. That's it carries a lot more integrity with it. So one of the issues in transition is to bring full, like sort of unabashed integrity to the transition. It's like, I didn't want to do that anymore. I set myself up, and I'm not talking about you right now. Or I set myself up, or I fucking hated what I did, so I didn't work very hard at it, or any of those kind of things. So that's the one piece. The beginning of that is to get incredibly honest about what really happened. So, even in like close to 10 years ago now, I got divorced, and it was like, yeah, I left because I was being cheated financially. I mean, at one point I found out that my wife had like 50 grand in credit card debt that I had no idea about. And when I got to that point where it was like, oh, you cheated me and you lied to me over a period of years, I actually said to her, I would have rather you gone and fucked somebody. And so one is fully having full integrity about what really happened. And then two, and the biggest thing that we do in transition that stops us from truly transitioning is we don't allow ourselves to grieve.
Hmm.
And we don't allow ourselves to have time to grieve. And you see it all the time in rebound relationships. People end a relationship and 3 weeks later they're fucking two women or something. And it's like, yeah, this is what I wanted. And it's like grieving, the grief process around major loss is usually a minimum of 18 months. And we think we ought to be through it in 18 minutes. And so whether it's the loss of a job, even if somebody goes, yeah, it wasn't my favorite job, or yeah, I'm really glad I'm out of that relationship, it still takes 18 months ish. And the bigger the loss, the more accurate the 18 months is. So those are the two really big things that actually stops us from being able to transition, is because if we have not, if one, we're not completely honest about what really happened, then we can't grieve that. And then two is if we don't give ourselves time to grieve, then we start stepping into whatever that next step is with a whole lot of unfinished business. And when we have that unfinished business, it gets in our way of whatever we're going to do next. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I think that you reframed this, the how to hold grief for me last year. Two deaths in the family, and it was very tough and challenging. And I don't know that I could have gotten through that without, I mean, talking sometimes 2 or 3 times a day. But giving the time for that grief. And I'm thinking now of, I've been on the other side of the riffing process where I've had to let people go. It's almost like we're in the great riff right now. Businesses are shedding employees like nobody's business. And it's a little ruthless right now because entire departments are getting cut into people who are good people who had nothing to do with it. They're a number on a spreadsheet, and it's like, yeah, I know he's great. This is too bad. Move on. Who's the next 20 people we have to let go? There's, Disney this week let go thousands of people, thousands, right? Disney. I mean, it's happening everywhere. We're in a really tough climate. So, I hadn't really thought about the giving time for the grief to happen. I'm the guy who, when something like this happens, I look at it as the opportunity. The universe has given me the opportunity to pivot. Right? This now, it's like, okay. And because I'm, that adapt and overcome, right? And what I've learned though from you, Dewey, in this last couple of years, or just this last year, to give it time, give it a little time, and give it honor the grief, right? Honor that, and right, and I think those were your exact words, and I didn't really know what that meant. So one of the things we want for this show is to, as elders who are continuing to experience and learn and live and make mistakes and be able to take training, to pass that along to 30, 35, 40, 45, 50-year-old guys, so they can get that now and not, and at least have that new skill in their toolbox on how to deal with these things and be aware. Oh yeah. And I think the other part that is very interesting is, because we've talked about this often, is the story we tell ourselves. So the story, I was an asshole, or I was a whatever. Being really honest about that. Is that story true? That's the question. Is it true? And I don't know if it's looking in the mirror and which is hard for a lot of guys, and it's hard for me, just literally looking in the mirror and saying that story out loud and say, is that true? That's some hard shit right there.
That's some hard shit right there. So let me add to that, because this is what you're saying, Mark, is really, really important. One of the directions I'm going, and it actually was part of a class that I taught a couple of weekends ago, is the whole concept of living in our intuition and our instinct, and knowing that we instinctually know how to grieve. That is a built-in process that we have. The whole grieving process, it's not something that we have made up. When people look at grieving, they go, oh, I've seen these 1,000 people do a similar kind of thing. When through denial, we have lost touch with our instinctual process, that blocks who we are and what we know. And what Mark is talking about is not that I did any great thing with him, other than truly connect with Mark on a clearly loving level, and allow and help him find his instinctual process to do what he needed to do. And that was through kindness and nurturing and connection and relationship and love and crying and laughing. And that's the piece that, if you can begin to allow yourselves to really drop into your own instincts through chipping away at the whole denial process, so you maybe even have instincts, that will take you to a different kind of place in your life on virtually every level. Does that make sense?
It makes so much sense, which is why I love getting up early on Saturday mornings to have these conversations. And I love the fact that we had a group of guys, a lot of familiar faces. I was so thrilled to have gone and spent the weekend in Austin and get to know these men and hug these men and spend time with them. It just deepens all of this. So thank you for that, and thanks for all of you who got up early. Dewey, I'm gonna leave us with this. You taught us this we had this experience with you in Austin of creating an opening, right? Creating an opening. And that had just been some words for me, and hadn't experienced that till we started working with the horses. And seeing that was just amazing to watch you work as a Jedi master, but then to see how once we could energetically create an opening, the animal would step into that opening. And I remember asking you, now that I know I'm not even a white belt at being able to do that, but now that I know that that is possible and that is a real thing, I've been doing it with my cats. And specifically one who's had a procedure last weekend, and he's just been ailing. And I've been like looking him in the eyes and doing and creating an opening, like physically visualizing the things that you taught us to do. I swear to God, it works.
It works.
Yeah. I love that. I love that about what you've taught me about relationships and nature and getting in touch with all of these beings. Everybody, thank you so much. We're going to do this again the last week of the month. We get up early in the morning and have these conversations. Duey Freeman, I love you, man.
Love you too, man. Thank you.
Thanks everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you,
Thank
everybody.
you, gentlemen. We love you.
Love you all.
Thanks, T. Bye-bye,
Cheers.
guys.